This series of stories is intended to make you laugh, cry, and reflect on your own life. Enjoy a wonderful man, my dad, sharing stories from his life between the years of 1944 to the present.
The Great Bike Chase. Bicycles mean a lot to some kids. They can get you downtown when you need to go. They can get you to school almost every day when the weather allows it. With a bike, you can be at a friend's house in just a short time. And with a little imagination, a bike becomes the horse you need to play out a part when you're reenacting a favorite cowboy movie that you may have seen. Usually on a Saturday afternoon when we'd all been to the movies, we would gather near the park, a cleared area that skirted the woods not far from our house. There we would each tell his own version of how the big chase scene or stagecoach robbery had occurred in the movie. Then we would divide up into good guys and bad guys. It didn't matter if you had to be a bad guy at first, because you knew in the next round you could be a good guy if you wanted to. There were always a few who delighted in being bad guys because they were really good on their bikes and knew they had a chance that they could outrun everybody else and escape capture. Capture was when you got close enough to touch the person trying to get away, then they had to sit out until the next round. Nobody tried that jumping from their horse bike and pulling the bad guy from his horse bike, at least not after Billy, who was pretty good and fast on his horse bike, pulled off one of the most spectacular captures of our cowboy movie scenes. He was in the role of sheriff, and one of the older boys playing the part of the notorious villain was really set on fouling up the scene by not being captured. Billy had wanted the sheriff's part because that day he was determined to bring law and order to our neighborhood with the capture of this nefarious criminal. The game was, after sides of good guys and bad guys been chosen, that the bad guys with the money from the holdup would be given a small head start. Then, as they rode off into the many trails and paths throughout the wooded part of our area and park, we would, as the posse, pursue them either by chasing after them on the same path or maybe choosing a different route we knew from much experience that would intercept where their route in an attempt to be the first to make a capture. This also meant that there were bikes headed down paths in opposite directions and sometimes directly toward each other. Some of the crashes were spectacular. Usually they only wound up with a horse bike down on each side of the path with the riders scrambling to either make a capture or regain their ride and make good their escape. Either way, it meant a skinned knee or elbow for somebody. But today was to be Billy's big day. We had been in hot pursuit of the daring gang of outlaws and had all of them in jail except their leader, who, on his 3-speed horse bike, had been able to cut through the woods and paths with little regard for his pursuers. Whenever someone began to close in, he would make a turn sharply away from the path he was on and avoid a near touch. Or he would simply rise up on his stirrups, pedals, and pull away before anyone could get close enough to effect the capture. The frustration of near miss after near miss was telling on us, and some were almost ready to give up. But then, when one of the posse had gotten close and the villain made a sharp turn to again elude capture, he failed to notice the sheriff, Billy, who had anticipated him turning back toward the path that would take him to safety. Billy had a bit of a downhill run. He had his horse bike at full gallop, directly in line with the escape route that the criminal felt would be his path to freedom. As the two of them, following their roles as near as possible for young boys to use their imagination and follow a role, came ever closer, Billy rose from his bike just as we have seen Gene Autry, Tom Mix, John Wayne, and oh so many others do from their trusty steeds. He left the pedals, handlebars, and saddle behind as he propelled himself through empty space. The one being pursued, having thought he was on his way to freedom, now could only hold the reins, handlebars, as he watched the sheriff rapidly descending on him in midair. And as we watched the climactic scene in what seemed slow motion on the silver screen of oh so many Saturdays, the sheriff, Billy, effected the capture of the last of the notorious gang of robbers by landing full on the bad guy's right side, dragging him and his horse, Bike, to the ground and tumbling more than once through underbrush and grass. "You got him! Did you see that? Way to go, Billy!" The shouts of admiration, victory, and total achievement went up from all of us. We had captured the bad guys, one and all. But now as we ran over to congratulate and raise up our hero, we realized all was not right. Both boys lay stretched out in the grass, with neither making any effort to get up. The one who had been the bad guy so hard to catch now lay on his back with his eyes wide open, gasping and trying to catch his breath. Billy was on his side, and his one arm didn't look quite right. Should it be bent back that way? Yep, it was broken. We helped him up, carefully not pulling on Billy's arm and making sure the other soon could get his breath. Somebody got each of the two bikes, and we all walked them both home. Billy's mom was kind of upset, but Billy was quick to let her know it was no one's fault but his own, and we others were just part of the game. For the next several weeks, Billy wore a plaster cast on his arm that went from his wrist to past his elbow. We all signed it, each one trying to make sure they put something on there to help recall that grand game of cowboys and robbers in hot pursuit. But right on top was where the words from the biggest outlaw of all, who only got caught that one time, stated, "You got me, Sheriff."